What is good, everybody, man? Appreciate y'all tuning in. And shout out to my guy, All Script, man. Happy birthday. No round table tonight, which is why I decided to move the FCS preview week 10 to Thursday night, same time as usually it is on Wednesday. Tomorrow we'll be over on the Blitz City podcast with my guy Kobe. He's doing a special show tomorrow night. I think he's doing FBS Fridays over there on Blitz City. Man asked me to jump on there and talk a little bit of college football with him tomorrow night live on Blitz City podcast. So make sure to hop over there tomorrow night, 7:30 p.m. Central Time, if I'm not mistaken. But loaded show tonight. Huge week 10 coming up, a lot of big games. So we'll go through the Buck Buchanan, Walter Payton, and Jerry Rice Award watch list right now for me. Then we'll get into some games. We'll get some notable games, some of the top FCS games, do our HBCU week 10 preview, talk about our game of the week, man. Then it's all live calls and comments from there, man. Want to get y'all's predictions, thoughts on this upcoming week of college football. 701-779-9585 is the call-in number tonight. But man, we already got a big prediction in the chat. I wasn't going to talk about this game, but Lawrence has Morgan State over Stony Brook, and I agree. I know Stony Brook's in the CAA, and if I'm not mistaken, Lawrence, it will be one of the first wins for the MEAC over the CAA in a very, very, very long time. I know I broke it down earlier this off season, just the win loss records over the past 5 years for the MEAC, but if I'm not mistaken, it's either like the first or second win could be for the MEAC over a CAA team in the past 5 years. So it would be huge for Morgan State, Damon Wilson. You have to give them a lot of credit. They beat South Carolina State last weekend convincingly. It was 41-14, and they're just way ahead of schedule. And I know a lot of people took my joke about throwing the MEAC away seriously. There were some people who were upset about that, but man, if you got to look at it from South Carolina State perspective. You cannot lose that game if you're South Carolina State and Buddy Pugh. After coming back and beating Central, you get video of your punter and some players on the sidelines saying, "Meet me in the Celebration Bowl." And they are just they're going crazy. And to go and get beat by almost 40 by Morgan State, as great as a coach as I think Damon Wilson is, man, they are not the team that South Carolina State was supposed to lose to this year. So I still think that's a terrible loss, even though I do agree with Lawrence here that if Morgan State can find a quarterback, Morgan State right now would be my pick to win the MEAC next year. I think that's how good their defense really could be. Now, I will say they do have to replace Alfonso Graham at the running back spot. If I'm not mistaken, he is a senior, and this is his last year of eligibility for the Bears, and that's a big loss. He's going to be a first-team all-conference selection, and the year he's having, man, he could potentially work his way onto a third or fourth team All-American team, depending on, Phil Steele, FCS Stats Perform, Hero Sports. There's a lot of people out here who do those. Do not be surprised if you see Alfonso Graham on one of those lists with the year that he's having, being as explosive as he is at the running back position for Morgan State. Definitely hit the like button. And like Sean said, we're going to keep everyone updated in the chat on the Valley game, 7-0 Valley early over Alabama A&M over there in the Delta. A tough road game for the Bulldogs after they lost the Magic City Classic last week. But let's get into the Walter Payton Award watch list. Nothing changes at the very top. It's Lindsey Scott and Tim DeMoret, and it's really everybody else. Third, fourth, fifth are really, really tight right now. It's going to come down to Lindsey Scott and Tim DeMoret down the stretch, making plays for their team. Lindsey Scott had probably his worst week of football last week, but he still has the resume right now to take home this award, man. Still completing over 73% of his passes, 3,000 plus yards, 38 touchdowns through the air, 6 rushing, only 4 INTs. He leads the country in passer efficiency. He's tied for first in passing touchdowns, third in completion percentage, and number 2 in passing yards. Tim DeMoret right there behind him, 3,200 passing yards, tied at 38 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing. number 2 in efficiency, number 1 in yards, tied for first in passing touchdowns. A new name to the list for the first time all season. Parker McKinney, Eastern Kentucky quarterback, has done enough, in my opinion, to jump on this watch list for the first time. Almost 70% completion percentage, 2,400 yards through the air, 20 passing touchdowns, 7 on the ground. He's top 15 in passer efficiency, 6th in touchdowns, 3rd in passing yards, and has been a key piece to the Eastern Kentucky offense, taking a big step forward as they knocked off SEMO last week in a huge upset that really shook up the top 25 last weekend. So I think it's still going to be Scott and DeMoret down the stretch. It's going to be hard for anyone to enter that conversation with them. It's really going to come down to which quarterback over these next 3 weeks has the biggest performances and the biggest games to end the season. But DeMoret put up 6 touchdowns last week against Holy Cross. If he would have came out with the win, there was a strong argument, in my opinion, to put him number 1. But right now, Lindsey Scott hangs on by a hair. But right now, they're really 1A and 1B. And Jay, I would say it's tough to say, Jay, because Cameron Ward, yes, he left. Lindsey, I think it's so tough, man, because you got to remember, Incarnate Word lost their head coach to the offensive coordinator spot at Washington State, which ultimately led to the departure of Cameron Ward. The scheme they run is so inducive for quarterback success. JG Kinney comes in. He was the OC over at UCF, where he's developed some really great quarterbacks. I do think it's a little bit the offense, man. I can't put my finger on it. I did not think Lindsey Scott would take the jump he did when he left Nichols, man. But you got to give JG Kinney and that coaching staff so much credit for what they've done with Lindsey Scott, man. You really do. And they've done a hell of a job right now developing him throughout the season. Now, the Buck Buchanan Award had a big shakeup. Patrick O'Connell's injury really shook things up this week for me. John Pius, still number 1 in my book. Over 50 tackles this year, 16 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, some pass breakups as well. Still leads the country in sacks and tackles for loss. The 2 biggest games of the season, he put on shows, and that's really important for me to put on shows in big games. If you're going to win one of these awards, I need you to do it in the biggest games, in the biggest moments. Now, Johnny Buchanan, Delaware linebacker, jumps into my top 3. We're entering week 10, guys. 102 total tackles, 4.5 for loss, half a sack, a forced fumble. He leads the country in total tackles. He has 4 games this season with 15 or more tackles already. Buchanan is on a whole nother level this year. And right now, Johnny Buchanan is on pace to, put up a record number of tackles. So Johnny Buchanan has to be second here. He's all over the place. The one, I guess, critique you could have is he doesn't have a lot of tackles for loss or sacks, but they really don't bring him on blitzes. He's a typical Mike linebacker. They use him to stop the run, and he does that very, very well. He had a 23 tackle performance against Navy week 1 that really kicked off his season in a special way. Now, Elijah Huzzy, a defensive back, like I've said, week after week, it's going to be hard for a DB to win this award, but he deserved a mention here. 50 plus tackles, 2.5 for loss, 4 INTs. He already has 12 pass breakups and a 99-yard interception return in a big win a few weeks ago. He's number 1 in the country in pass breakups and passes defended. Him and Maxwell Anderson have been the 2 best DBs in the country. Just right now, I think Huzzy's playing at a little bit of a higher level because people are probably shying away from Maxwell Anderson moving forward for Weber State. Now, the Jerry Rice Award list, Giovanni McCoy and Reese Poffenbarger are the 2 names that are going to stay the same. Both have been cruising right now. Both are approaching 20 touchdowns. Both do not turn the football over. And both of these guys, McCoy's close to 2,000 yards. Poffenbarger passed it this past weekend, 2,300 passing yards as a true freshman. Now, Ryan Butler, Princeton running back, bumped on the list. I wanted to wait and see. The Ivy League started 2.5 weeks after everybody. I wanted to see if Butler could keep up the pace. He has 400 plus rushing yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground, averaging almost 5 yards per carry, and has a receiving touchdown. I think Butler's going to get some consideration. But as I've said with the Walter Payton Award, I think it's McCoy and Poffenbarger down the stretch. And McCoy has some huge games, man. McCoy has faced multiple ranked teams, led that team to a Montana upset, and threw 3 touchdowns this weekend against Sacramento State, the number 2 team in the country, has 0 turnovers and almost led them to an upset. So I think his ability to play in the biggest games and the biggest moments are going to be the separating factor between McCoy and Poffenbarger moving forward for the Jerry Rice Award. Now, some notable games to watch this weekend. This one, oh man, this one had all the potential in the world. And I'm still really excited for it. I'm going to be in Nashville this weekend to cover SEMO versus Tennessee State. But both teams, I, I, I hate to say this, they kind of let me down last week. SEMO gets upset by Eastern Kentucky last week, and Tennessee State loses to Murray State. 0 wins on the season for Murray State, got their first win, and it took all the wind out of the sails of what was going to be a huge run down the stretch for Tennessee State. Now they do still technically control their destiny, because if they win this game and beat UT Martin, they would win the tiebreaker if they win out, because they do only have one conference loss. It's just where I want to see where the team morale is going to be after that loss to Murray State. And they've lost 4 straight games to SEMO by an average of 23 points per game. So the history is not on their side. They're going to need Jalen Rouse. They're going to need Devon Starling to have huge games. And on the flip side, SEMO is, I would say, probably has one of the best running backs in the FCS, and Geno Hess. He's over 3,300 rushing yards for his career. He's 55 yards shy from tying the school's all-time record in rushing yards. Their passing attack has been a lot better with DeLorean at quarterback. It's going to come down to which team can stop the other team from running the football. That's what it's going to come down to. This is in Nashville. Tennessee State should have a solid home field advantage, but this is going to be a big test for Eddie George and this Tennessee State team, because it is so easy to get discouraged based on what we saw last weekend when you lose 19-3 to a team that has not been competitive whatsoever. And so that's the big question mark for me going into this game. And now, UT Martin, Kennesaw State was a game that I thought at the beginning of the season could potentially solve some conference championship issues. And both UT Martin still in contention, but Kennesaw State has been one of the biggest disappointments of the year. This team comes in top 10 overall ranking in the preseason top 25. They're sitting at 4-4, and their past 2 games they needed overtime to get past a Tennessee Tech team that has not been very good, and they get past Charleston Southern by only 10 points at home. You have to wonder just where this Kennesaw State team is. What has gone wrong? Has it been the defense hasn't lived up to the hype? Is it people now have so much film on this triple option and what Xavier Shepherd and this offense can do that they're struggling to move the football? There's just so many questions about this Kennesaw State team coming into here. Xavier Shepherd came in as an All-American. He still has 7 rushing touchdowns, over 400 yards on the ground, but he's been turning the football over when you force him to put it in the air. If you're UT Martin, load the box and try to make Kennesaw State throw the football. If they do that, they win this game. Walking away, Dresser Wynn has been electric at quarterback, 2,200 passing yards this year. Zach Wallace, 14 rushing touchdowns on the ground. Colton Dowell has been a matchup nightmare. And on the defensive side, they've had a lot of playmakers. I like UT Martin to win this game. I think Kennesaw State can keep it competitive on the road, but I just have not seen anything from Kennesaw State that gives me hope that they can pull off this upset this weekend, especially on the road. So give me UT Martin in a close one over Kennesaw State. Now, a game that I don't know exactly how to feel about it. Eastern Washington, they lose Eric Barrier, and this season has been atrocious. I think that's the nicest way I can put it. Eastern Washington is sitting at 2-6. They had a brutal schedule early, but they are really, really missing Eric Barrier. The offense has not looked great. Gunnar Talkington has done south at over 2,000 yards through the air, 20 touchdowns, but he's thrown 8 picks. The rushing attack isn't really there. The offense is only averaging about 24, 25 points per game. And right now, I just don't think they have the defense to win like that. Idaho's coming in. We've already talked about Giovanni McCoy on this show. Woods can run the football. They have one of the best tight ends in Hayden Hatton that has been absolutely unstoppable in one-on-one matchups. 3 touchdowns last week against the number 2 team in the country. Eastern Washington is coming off a loss to Portland State. They have to go into the dome over there in Idaho. Give me Giovanni McCoy, Idaho, pulling off another Big Sky win, getting to 6-3, and there's a great chance Idaho can win out this season, finish the season 8-3, be firmly in the playoff race, and we're going to see what the freshmen can do if the Vandals get into the bracket. So give me Idaho this weekend over Eastern Washington. Now, William and Mary Hampton is a game. It actually has more at stake than people think. I know people I hyped Hampton up 2 weeks ago. They're on a 2-game losing streak. Man, they are the most I feel like they're one of the most inconsistent offenses that I've watched. Mays at quarterback can be electric, man. 1,300 yards, 14 touchdowns, can get out of the pocket and make plays with his legs. But 12 interceptions is a killer, an absolute killer. You cannot throw interceptions in the CAA. And this weekend, with the front 7 that William and Mary has with Nate Lynn, John Pius, if they can force Mays into mistakes, this one is going to get extremely ugly for the Pirates. They are going to have to try to find a way to establish the run, keep the pressure off of Mays, and get the ball to Jadakiss Bonds. That's the key. Jadakiss Bonds is having an all-conference type season, over 600 yards, 8 touchdowns through the air. But the rushing attack of William and Mary, I feel like, is going to just play keep away. They're going to try to grind out Hampton this weekend, run the football straight down their throat. And I don't know if Hampton has an answer. They are on a 2-game losing streak. They lost 41-10 to Richmond, 24-10 to Villanova last week on the road. They host William and Mary that has to win this game, 1, to keep pace in the CAA, and 2, also put themselves in position for a potential top 8 seed in the playoffs. I trust the Tribe to come in motivated. I think the defensive line is going to be way too much for Mays in this Hampton offense. Give me William and Mary convincingly over Hampton this weekend on the road. And some of the top games before we get into our HBCU preview for the week: South Dakota State, Northern Iowa, in a extremely interesting matchup, I would say. This game to me is a trap. It is questionably a trap game for South Dakota State. I said that I thought South Dakota State could win out, and there were some people who reached out to me and said, listen, that road trip to UNI, watch out because they can get caught up, man. Theo Day, solid at quarterback. The defense is stingy. Benny Sapp and those guys can make things extremely interesting if South Dakota State doesn't come with their top game. I just trust South Dakota State to run the football, man. Isaiah Davis in that running back room is one of the best in the country, and South Dakota State is going to make UNI one-dimensional. They've only allowed one team to run for over 100 yards this year. That was North Dakota State. And I just think UNI one-dimensional is not going to be enough to beat South Dakota State even at home. I think South Dakota State sees the national championship path in front of them. They've never won the FCS national championship. I can't imagine they're going to come in and overlook UNI. Give me the Jackrabbits convincingly this weekend over UNI on the road. Now, Montana State, NAU, a huge Big Sky matchup, another quote-unquote trap game to some Big Sky watchers in the chat. I know a few people reached out to me and said, listen, this is a game that if Montana State gets caught looking, could potentially be one that they lose. But I'm here to tell you, man, that rushing attack where NAU's allowing almost 200 on the ground per game, and Montana State's coming in putting up almost 300 per game on the ground, 6.2 yards per carry. Isaiah Afonzi's close to coming back. Sean Chambers is hopefully back this weekend. You already know what you got in Tommy Millott, Elliott at the running back spot. They are going to absolutely try to run the ball down NAU's throat. And if NAU's defense is not disciplined, this thing's going to get away from them. I love what Brent Vegan is doing for the Bobcats this year. I think I said on the show 2 days ago, if you guys saw it, someone asked me if I had to put my money on a team to be in Frisco and win the national championship right now in early November. I would put my money on Montana State to win the national title right this second. I think when you look at the players they have coming back, they got two starting offensive linemen returning in the next week. There's All-American running back is going to be completely fresh coming off an injury. They got two quarterbacks. The backup leads the country in rushing touchdowns with 16. Man, and with the defense playing like it is, I have a hard time seeing anybody giving Montana State a run for their money right now in the playoffs. There's a few teams that can do it. You look at South Dakota State's defense, maybe North Dakota State if Montana State ends up having to go to Frisco, which based on the way it's looking, that's probably not going to happen. This one's going to be huge, but um, the front seven for NAU is not bad, man. They got some real playmakers. Cosmas Queedy at the defensive end spot, 7.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. His brother Eloy Queedy, 9 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. They are going to have to play big. You have to play in the backfield of Montana State. And I know Ron's in the chat. I see him. He could tell you if Montana State can run the football, you have no shot. And so give me Montana State big over NAU this weekend. An underrated matchup this weekend. I know the Ivy League is a conference that not a lot of people give a lot of attention to due to them not playing in the playoffs. But Princeton Dartmouth was supposed to probably be an Ivy League, uh, a deciding game in the Ivy League, but Dartmouth has not lived up to the hype. Princeton's sitting undefeated right now, number 25 in the country. They were ranked this weekend. This could be their first undefeated season since 2018, and they could potentially win back-to-back Ivy League championships for the first time since the early 60s. I've already talked about Ryan Butler at the running back spot, true freshman stud at running back, but the passing attack has been electric as well. Andre is Lovas, 700 plus yards receiving, 6 touchdowns, having a big year. Watch out for Dylan Classy, though, in terms of the backup wide receiver. He's been an underrated weapon for the Tigers this weekend. I just don't trust the Dartmouth offense to get anything going. They have really struggled to put points on the board and put up consistent drives. Give me Princeton continuing their undefeated season, getting to 8-0 on the year. Now, the final game here is New Hampshire versus Richmond. This is a big one. New Hampshire comes into this one undefeated in conference play. They got a tough road ahead of them. They got to play Delaware, William and Mary after this. They need a win against Richmond. They could find a way to win their first outright CAA championship since 2014. It's been a long time going. Dylan Lobb has to be electric at the running back spot, and he's coming off a huge game against Elon 2 weeks ago, but they're going to have to try to find a way to slow down Reese Udinsky in this Richmond passing attack. Me and Coach Fred on the coaching corner already broke this one down. I'm going with the Spiders in a close one, just because I trust Reese Udinsky to make the plays. 2,200 passing yards, 19 touchdowns. He leads the country in completion percentage as well. Over 77% of his passes completed this year. He's been so efficient, and the Spiders' front seven has been great against the run. I think they're going to be able to make New Hampshire one-dimensional at home. Give me the Spiders in a quote-unquote upset 35-28 over New Hampshire. Now, HBCU preview here, man. There's a lot of big games this weekend. We'll start with, I think, probably the one with the most. I think the Southern FAMU game probably has the most on the line in terms of HBCU matchups this weekend for the SWAC at least. Southern needs this win to stay in contention for a SWAC championship appearance. They're also going to need PV to lose, and FAMU this weekend is going to have to win convincingly to have a shot at the playoffs. That's going to be huge moving forward for FAMU. And I know people. I've been really surprised to kind of hear people's takes on this game. So a lot of people who think Southern's going to come in here and really put it on FAMU. And for me, going back and looking at the film, kind of looking at the matchups, I see it the complete other way. I think FAMU has the significant advantage this weekend over Southern. I do. Outside of the defensive line, potentially getting pressure and forcing Musa into mistakes, I think the Gerard Sims injury could potentially be huge for Southern. I know, listen, Carl Ligon and Kendrick Rhymes are excellent running backs, but to lose arguably your top 2 running backs on your roster coming into the season, Is that going to be too much to overcome for Southern? FAMU, Xavier Smith leads the SWAC in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. I think Xavier Smith is going to have a big game again. I think the strength of Southern's defense is at the safety spot in the defensive line. I expect Xavier Smith to go off this weekend again. And as great as Southern's defensive line is, they rank second in the conference in sacks. FAMU is coming into this game top 3 in the SWAC in fewest sacks allowed this season. And on top of that, as much as the secondary has taken a lot of criticism this year, Kendall Bowler, BJ Bowler have been a great duo. Also, Javin Morgan has really outplayed his expectations, at least for me. And so I don't think it's going to be a blowout either way. I think FAMU just has the playmakers to get it done. And as crazy as this might sound, I trust Musa more than I trust McCray. And so I'm going to go with FAMU here. I got FAMU winning a 3-point game over Southern this weekend at home. And also the second longest home winning streak is on the line this week. FAMU, if I'm not mistaken, has the second longest FCS home winning streak right behind Montana State. And I think that stadium is going to be electric. I've heard just how I don't even know how to explain it, but they said it's different in Bragg, and I think that's going to be a huge factor this weekend for FAMU. So give me FAMU by 3 over Southern this weekend. And Texas Southern, Jackson State this weekend. I know this is a big game for a lot of people. 6 p.m. Central. It's sold out apparently. I think that was released earlier this week. Jackson State, Texas Southern. This is a must win for both teams because someone called me and was like predicted Texas Southern to win, and I was just like, man, I can't see it. I'm sorry. I was checking out some stats on Jackson State's defense. I was doing some research for an article I'm working on, and the Jackson State defense right now leads the country in total defense. They've allowed less than 200 yards per game. The scoring defense is allowing 8.8 points per game. And this is the craziest stat ever because I didn't know this was a stat until earlier today when I was doing some research. They have not allowed a team to throw for 150 yards in a single game. That is insane. This passing defense is just on another level. I mean, I don't think people understand how hard that really is. And that's going to be a huge difference maker. And also the Texas Southern defense allowing 210 plus yards per game on the ground. This is a game. I was talking about it earlier on another channel. This is a game not to get complicated. This isn't a stat padding game for Shador. This isn't a chance to get the ball into playmakers' hands. Just run the football. Run the football right down Texas Southern's throat and get out of there with a win. That's it. Just give the ball to Savion, give the ball to JD Martin, whoever you want to give it to. Just run the football. That Texas Southern has not been able to stop the run all season long. Run the football. That's it. Just run the football. And when you look at Texas Southern, the strength of that team is in the secondary. Right now, Texas Southern leads the SWAC in INTs, 12 interceptions, 3 defensive touchdowns off of interceptions for Texas Southern. Isaiah Hamilton is an absolute stud and has the highest grade in the SWAC in terms of coverage grade from a cornerback position. So the secondary is the strength. They can't stop the run. Just run the football. That's it. And if Texas Southern looks to make this one close, it has to be on the back of Andrew Body. It does. I know they run the football well. They have 2 or 3 backs back there that can get the job done. Body has to go off this weekend. He has 1,600 plus total yards this year, 12 touchdowns. If he has a big game, great things could happen for Texas Southern. If he's shut down, Texas Southern does not have a shot this weekend to pull off this upset. I still think Jackson State's defense is way too much. I do think they're going to run the football. And I think Jackson State pulls away in this one. I got Jackson State 31, Texas Southern 10 this weekend, and a big win for Jackson State on the road in Houston this weekend. Now, the two MEAC games that we're going to have to talk about here, Howard versus North Carolina Central, in South Carolina State, Delaware State. Now, if I told y'all, I want y'all in the chat to let me know if I told you guys in August that Howard was going to be leading the MEAC in early November, how many of y'all would have bet me whatever y'all wanted to whatever I asked for, pretty much. I mean, Howard is leading the MEAC entering week 10 of the season. The same Howard team that lost to Alabama State week 1, the same Howard team that struggled with Hampton is leading is really leading the MEAC standings right now over South Carolina State, over North Carolina Central, over Morgan State. I mean, that is just insane. He said nobody. Oh man, I'm dead. But man, Howard has a real path to a Celebration Bowl, and this is how serious it's been, guys. And this is a conversation I never thought I would ever have in a space. Last night, HBCU Nightly, man, shout out to Josh and everyone who puts that on in Twitter Spaces. We had to realistically have a conversation that I couldn't believe I actually had to have about what the matchup between Howard and Jackson State will look like in Atlanta for the Celebration Bowl. I don't understand how this has happened, but man, listen, Howard, it all starts with Quentin Williams' play. I told y'all week 1 I picked them over Alabama State because I this team has talent, and if Quentin Williams would just play to his potential, Howard has a really, really great team. And they do, man. Quentin Williams these past 2 weeks has played electric. They're entering on a win streak. The key is going to be running the football, though. North Carolina Central has allowed 200 plus yards on the ground in 5 games this season. They've really struggled stopping the run. Kenny Gallup has to be a key player to watch defensively. They're going to have to try to get pressure on Davius Richard. If Howard can run the football, shorten the game up, and limit explosive plays by Central, I absolutely can see them winning this game, as crazy as that might sound. And when you look at Central, the key is simple. Central goes as far as Davius Richard takes them. He's that type of player. Over 2,200 total yards this year, 26 touchdowns. He leads the team in rushing and also leads the team in passing. And the key is going to be allow him to go make plays. Devin Smith, by far his biggest target, has been electric at the wide receiver spot. He's number 22, had 2 big touchdowns in that Campbell game. This is going to be an extremely interesting matchup because I think it's going to come down to Richard's play, because when Richard plays bad, they lose. Richard did not play well against Campbell. Richard did not play well against South Carolina State, and they took a major loss in both of those games. For Howard, though, if you cannot run the football, which I just said, Central cannot stop the run. Howard's offensive line is bigger than North Carolina Central's defensive line, and if they come out in that 3-3-5, it's going to be extremely interesting. Now, everything in me wanted to go with Howard in this one, but I have a feeling Richard is just going to be able to do just enough to squeak this one by. I have Central winning by 3, 34-31 over Howard this weekend on the road. Do not be surprised if Howard makes this extremely competitive. And if Howard pulls off the upset, we could realistically be looking at a Howard Jackson State matchup in the Celebration Bowl. It would come down to potentially if South Carolina State loses a game and Howard beats Central, it's Howard, man. That just blows my mind that Howard has a chance to win the MEAC. But man, I just can't go with Howard right now. I'm gonna go with Central in a close one. But do not be surprised if Howard makes this one a game. I saw some comments. no one in the DMV cares about Howard. People will know who'll be performing at the homecoming concert before they know who Howard is going to play in the game. Oh man, he said Howard folks will win best dressed. But Mr. Campbell, 63-0. Oh my God, man. But listen, Delaware State, South Carolina State. I had to cover this game too. If I would have told, okay, I cannot believe this is really a game that I am torn on picking. South Carolina State has really failed to run the football in big games. And if Delaware State can find any ability to load the box, find a way to double cover Shaq Davis, there is a hell of a chance Delaware State could pull off the upset over South Carolina State. Corey Fields has been atrocious in big games this season. It's either Shaq Davis or bust. I mean, just to throw one on you guys, 14 touchdowns for Corey Fields this year. 8 of them have went to Shaq Davis. And he's thrown for 1,400 yards. Over 650 of those have been to Shaq Davis. It is Shaq Davis or bust right now for this offense. And also the defense has not lived up to the hype at all. And that's something that really worries me. The other question is, what will Delaware State's offense look like? We've seen an electric Delaware State offense where CJ Henry absolutely goes off and carries this team to some big wins. But then we've also seen Delaware State get let down in big games. Merrimack, Howard, where the offense just has not found a way to bring any sort of consistency to the field, and it puts their defense in bad situations because they're out there the entire time. You got to give Coach Milstead some credit. When Asias Guthrie transferred, there were a lot of people who, including myself, who took that transfer as a sign of things going downhill for Delaware State, where it was like, man, their best defensive player decided to enter the transfer portal, and it was the whole free Asias thing, and there was just a lot of question marks surrounding what was going on behind the scenes at the program. But since that transfer, man, they've been solid. They're coming into this game 4-4. They have a shot to win their second conference game. They're 1-2 in the conference, and you're getting a South Carolina State team that right now has a lot of questions, especially after you lose to Morgan State 41-14. And it's really, to me, this is one of the hardest games to pick of the week because I just don't know which team's going to show up, because we've seen really bad Delaware State teams and really bad South Carolina State teams. And just based off who I think has more talent and why I think, for some reason, I just feel like Buddy Pugh is not going to lose 2 conference games in a row. I got South Carolina State in a close one, 28-24 over Delaware State right now. So give me South Carolina State in a close one. I just, for some reason, is just telling me that I can't trust Delaware State right now in in this one. What's your question, Media One? Definitely, I'll get to that. But listen, I'm opening the call lines right after this game of the week. Quickly preview easily the game of the week, man. Top 5 matchup, number 2 Sac State traveling to number 5 Weber State. ESPN Plus this weekend at 2 p.m. Central. This is the simplest breakdown of this game is going to go. I was on the Weber State Weekly podcast, man. Shout out to my guys over there. Everyone knows if you stop Sac State's run game, you win the game. If you allow them to continue running the football for almost 300 yards per game, then you have no shot, man. Cameron Scatabo, almost 1,000 yards rushing this year. Asher O'Hara, 14 rushing touchdowns, second in the country right now. One of the most dynamic duos on the ground. Armand Bailey, Marte Mapu, that linebacking core, that front 7 for Sac State are going to be extremely difficult to handle, even at home. When you look at Weber State, Sac State enters this game on a 16-game conference winning streak in the Big Sky. Their last loss was to Weber State in 2019 on the road. The Wildcats are going to rely on that run game with Bankston and McMillan taking over for an injured Davis at the running back spot. The defense has been great this year. They've only allowed 3.2 yards per carry, been top 20 in the country against the run. But when I went back and looked at the film, they really struggled stopping Montana State's rushing attack, which is very similar to how Sac State likes to attack teams with the quarterback and running back. When you look at O'Hara, you look at Scadabo, very similar to how Malott, Chambers, and that rushing attack over at Montana State works. And that's what worries me right now about this Weber State Sac State matchup. So right now, I'm going to lean Sac State in a close one, 27-24 over Weber State on the road. I just trust this rushing attack of Sac State to make one or two plays that makes a difference in the game, especially after Weber State lost. I lost that Montana State game, and it was because they could not stop the rushing attack. So give me Sac State in a close one over Weber State in this top 5 matchup, man. And yeah, that's Ron, that's what the craziest stat of all time. They've only lost one game in the Big Sky in the last 4 years. That is a crazy streak when you think about how tough the Big Sky Conference is as a whole. So that's an insane stat to think about. But man, call lines are open now. Also, man, we'll answer any comments in the chat for the next 15, 20 minutes. Week 10 FCS preview, call in number 701-779-9585. 85 for A&L will not play the rest of the game. Yeah, they're definitely missing some of their top receiving threats for sure. The thing about South Carolina State is that they are too inconsistent. They can beat the best team on any day and lose to the worst team on any day. I agree. It's it's something that I guess we all saw last year, Drum Major, but it was something that I think everyone kind of overlooked after that Celebration Bowl. But let's just go back to the Celebration Bowl. When you really look at that I know they won the game convincingly, but when you look at that game in totality, the inconsistency was in that game as well. South Carolina State in the first half played completely different than they did in the second half. And it really showed, it really showed the deficiencies of that South Carolina State team. I don't think they addressed any of them this year. I think the run game has regressed. The defense has regressed. The quarterback play hasn't gotten any better. And it all added up into a disappointing year thus far for South Carolina State. This year's been disappointing, but I'm riding with my team. I believe we'll win out and be back in the Celebration Bowl with these ugly wins. Howard versus Jackson State would be full of celebs in Atlanta. I don't know if I'm going to be in at the SWAC championship, Calvin, or a playoff game that weekend. But as soon as I kind of get my schedule together for the playoff playoff / off season, I'll let y'all know where I'm going to go. 2606, you're live.
Hey, Blue, how you doing, brother?
What's up, man?
Hey, I wanted to talk about JSU's inability to start fast or even get something going north-south early in the game. And my concern is that I'm not sure if the coach, Coach Prime, understands the personality of his team, because he keeps talking about starting fast. That just may be their personality. What do you think?
Sometimes I think it's just they have to get into the flow of the game. I mean, early, I know a lot of people have expectations that, and listen, you do script probably the first few plays, but I think people put way too much into that, because I hear this all the time. You shouldn't start slow because the first part of the game is scripted. Man, you can only script the first 2, 3, 4 plays of the game. Like, you just have to get into the flow of the game. And I think they have so many weapons on offense that sometimes they just kind of have to fill out who's going to be the guy. Because one week it could be Dallas Daniels. One week it could be Shador just having a big game in general. It could be Savion Wilkerson. It could be Shane Hooks. It can be Willie Gaines. There's just so many weapons that sometimes they just got to figure out who has the hot hand that day.
Yeah. We haven't seen Quay Davis, and I'm not understanding why and I'm not sure if it's practice thing or whatever. I don't need anybody to know, but I just was wondering. We haven't seen much of Quay, and he's a fantastic player. So I don't know, man. I'm with you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, their personality, their personality. They start slow, or they got to get the flow or whatever. Then that's how they roll. So
And really, it's just the offense. The defense
yeah.
is always ready, and sometimes that's okay, man. If you have the best defense in the country statistically, then
Mhm.
it's all good. You can
Yeah.
afford to start slow sometimes because you know your defense
Yeah.
is not giving up any points, and so
Mhm.
I think down the stretch of the season we'll see how that evolves because it should, knowing how good your defense is, should take some pressure off the offense early in the
Yeah.
game, like
And
in the first quarter.
one other thing, and then let me get off. I know you're offensive line guy. Is it me, or do am I seeing something different that for some reason they're getting beat in certain parts of the game? I mean, that offensive line, I mean, it's better, but I mean, Shador is constantly harassed. I mean, people are still making plays for loss, in the backfield and things like that. So I was like, man, what's going on here? It could be so much improved, but I mean, there's other players in the league that are good too. So
I do
that's my thought on that.
I do think they have improved. I think
Hmm.
that they're the best O line in the conference or anything like that? No. But they have they're dominant in run blocking a lot of the times. Like when
Yeah.
if Jackson State runs downhill, they got some
Hmm.
maulers up front. Now, I do see some inconsistencies in pass blocking, but when your quarterback is
Hmm.
Shador, he can get out of the pocket and do what he did. What he had 2 rushing touchdowns last weekend, and that
Hmm.
one big one where he went for what, like 40 plus yards. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it is Shador holding the onto the ball too long, but
Yeah.
I think they're fine, really and truly. I mean, the offensive
Okay.
line is not a
Hey
huge
man,
problem.
thank you for your time.
Hey, appreciate you, man.
Yes, sir. All right.
Man, the chat is hilarious. Man, everything's good. Everything's good. I agree, man. I lost that comment though, picking up. Let's see. Hang on. I think that's the same caller. Oh no. Okay. He hung back up. I think he meant to call back. Let's see. I'm trying to find that. Hang on, man. I'm gonna address your comment. I lost it there trying to look at the chat. I Los J, I do think he's been the best corner in the SWAC and one of the best in the country at the FCS level. But it's so I'm just going to keep it real with you for the Buck Buchanan for defensive player of the year, etc. It's so hard for corners to win that award because the great corners don't have a lot of stats. And a lot of the voters, especially in the SWAC, I'm just going to be on, I'm like in conference level, the SIDs and and some people in offices vote for it. So I don't see a great shot of Isaiah Hamilton winning the defensive player of the year. If I now who should win it? I think it's Ronnie Thomas from Valley. I think Ronnie Thomas should win the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year if the season ended today, but it'll probably come down to him or Aubrey uh, winning that award. But I personally think right now Ronnie Thomas has had the most dominant season in the SWAC in terms of a defensive player, and I'm not actively watching the A&M Valley game. I got it playing in the background, but I'm not actively watching. I don't know what his stat line is tonight, but right now Ronnie Thomas is in probably the top 5 for the Buck Buchanan. So I think Ronnie Thomas would be someone that probably has a little bit better shot right now, Los J. But I don't know if they're going to give it to him just because he plays at Valley. But I don't think Isaiah Hamilton has a great shot to win DPO. Wow. But I do think Isaiah Hamilton should be first team all conference and potentially even be considered for some like third, fourth team all American consideration the way he's playing. Ron, I don't know how you feel about this, Ron. There's some people in the chat um are like watching the game, but for the North Dakota State team, I do think this is probably the worst North Dakota State team in probably the last 5 years, Ron. I don't know how you feel about that. I don't see the it factor with this team, and of course I've talked about on multiple shows. And I had an interview with HBCU Sports today about Jackson State and compared to some of the top teams in the FCS. I've talked about sometimes I understand playoff football at the FCS level is different than regular season football, and you can never count out NDSU in the playoffs. So I do agree with you, Ron. In the playoffs, it's going to be different, but I still think this year that they've shown a lot of deficiencies in key areas, especially um, rushing defense. That is horrible, man. If the fact that Eason is picking apart A&M secondary is bad, and I know everyone's coming to Mobile next week for the game, man, but like that, I don't know. That game has lost so much luster to me in terms of outside of the storyline of Prime and Maynard. I don't think that game has any. I don't think that game's super interesting on a football level. I don't see that game. I, I'll ask you guys in the chat. Would you give A&M or Texas Southern a better chance to beat Jackson State? I just want to get the answer to that real quick. Would you give Texas Southern or Alabama A&M a better chance to beat Jackson State right now? Because I think there's a solid argument that you would probably give Texas Southern a little bit better chance right now, the way that A&M is playing. He said, "What gift? What gift should probably have made her?" Oh man, she said, "I'm not going anymore. I gotta take a break." They'll live up to their SWAC press conference. They played really hard. They played really tough. They lost. I'm just saying. Now I understand neither. I got neither, but I'm just saying you have to pick one. TSU, it's not bad. It's A&M. Texas Southern has a better chance. TSU, man, Texas Southern, like Mr. Ford says, should be a football power being in the Houston. Oh man. See, Texas Southern, and that is saying a lot. A&M is not scoring over 10 points against JSU. That's oh man. That game coming into that um that game was supposed to be like the SWAC game of the year, man. Like that was supposed to be like one of the most look forward to game of the year, but it has not lived up to the hype at all. At all. Oh man, I'm sick that that game isn't going to be. He said, "Man, it's going to be quiet as a flu." Oh man, they're not playing all their starters. Oh man. See, Investor Tom, but we felt like you allowed your buddies on that recent Auburn podcast. Uh, man, it was a call-in show, Media One, and the people on the call do not represent my thoughts on the matter. I've already spoken on the Prime to Auburn rumors. I don't think it's going to happen, and I think Lane Kiffin and Hugh Freeze are bigger, much bigger candidates for the job. But listen, I don't think any, I, I don't think anyone should allow random Auburn fans to speak for how I feel about anything. Um, I think that's a little weird that people are just assuming that all Auburn fans represent on how I feel. I'm just a producer of the show. I don't get an opinion on anything. I'm just on the show to take calls. They didn't even ask my opinion on anything. So I've already been vocal that I don't think it's going to happen. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I don't have any, um, I don't know which podcast you're even talking about, but all Auburn podcasts do not represent the views of me at all. This is my platform over here, and I don't think anyone should allow other Auburn fans to represent my views whatsoever. All HBCUs in Texas should be killing, especially now. Get all those transfers that are sitting on the bench at those Group of Five and Big 12 schools. I don't know how they don't get more transfers from like SMU Sam Houston State. I mean, well, they're moving up, or any of these like big Texas schools. That makes that makes zero. I don't understand how they don't. Let's see. Alabama A&M plays UTSAT. They get mauled. My argument for Texas Southern being more competitive. Look at that UAB game, Owen. Look at that UAB game. Ron, I picked Tennessee in that one. I released the preview this week. I'm definitely going with Tennessee, man. They just got that. They got it, that special. They got that 2019 LSU feel, man. And I might be picking with my heart on that one, but I'm giving you. I'm riding with Tennessee this year. I tried to tell y'all A&M would be nothing. JSU was fine, but their coach seems to be concerned about the slow start and fourth down failures. I think the I think the biggest thing for Jackson State for me, I don't like the fourth down. Like those are special circumstances where you go for it. I think Jackson State's biggest concern shouldn't even be the slow starts. Jackson State's biggest concern should be red zone execution, because I've talked about this. I've talked about it on the show um, multiple times. Uh, I personally think if Jackson State scores in the red zone at a higher rate, man, you talking about absolute bloodbaths on the schedule. Like, I don't remember off the top of my head, just because it's been a long time. But what they were in the red zone, or at least in Tennessee State territory, like 8 times, and came away with uh, almost no points on those, because they had the Shane Hooks fumble, they had was it the block field goal, they had the interception. There was just consistent mistakes in the red zone. And so for me, that would be a way bigger concern than slow starts or fourth down failures. Coach Green, you're live, man.
What's up, man?
What's good?
Yeah, had to call your show too, man. Since we got, you know, waxed.
Man,
Yeah.
how you feeling? I just got to check on you, because I know people have been absolutely giving you straight hell this week, man. How are you feeling?
I feel good because you know what? Last time we got a donut, we took it out on the next four teams. So you know who about to get it now? FAMU.
You got what's your prediction this weekend? You got Southern beating FAMU this weekend?
Yep, 28-20.
I don't know about that, man. I don't know.
28-20. Hey, we having some rattlesnake stew this weekend.
Oh my god, man. That fair enough. Hey, I, so pretty much what I was told by Mr. Campbell is anyone who understands HBCU football is picking FAMU. Anyone picking Southern does not know their history.
Man, history this is Dooley we talking about. Forget history. This is Dooley. Because I was only wrong once, right? Have I been wrong once?
In your prediction for that streak, yes, you're only wrong once on that streak.
Yeah. Cause look, I called it right. I said, that JV game, I just count that as a bye week, so I ain't really talk about that one. But I said we was gonna win 3 in a row. I ain't even talk about that game. I was gonna wait till, and then as far as the JSU game, I was gonna wait till that weekend to talk about it because I knew that was that's a different ball game. They not the 3 that we beat. But we sit there and lost. But we gonna hey, I'm hoping Alcorn find their special teams or something and beat Prairie View so we could get that rematch. Because if we get that rematch, boy, hey, that SWAC championship about to be crazy. I'm just put it like that.
Who does PV have after this?
This past weekend was packed. That championship gonna be packed.
Yeah, if it's back in the vet, for sure. But I don't know. Is Southern bringing the same number of people after what happened? Are they gonna travel back to Jackson to potentially watch another shutout?
Man, nah, ain't gonna be no shutout this time. And Mr. Campbell, let me tell you something. The Dancing Dolls ain't calling you this weekend. The Dancing Dolls not messing with you this weekend because we got some rattlesnake stew to be serving right now. So we ain't messing with you this weekend until after the game. They'll call you after the game. Nah, they ain't messing with you. But the things I saw in the game, bro, I'll put it like this. I felt like we had a chance before that fumble. Because you saw we was going down the field. It was 14-0, and we was going down the field before halftime. And Liggins took off running and then fumble. And then I was like, shit, it's over. That's when I knew it was over. When he fumbled, I said it was over with for us. So I already knew after halftime it was over for us. I was just hoping we'd score some points, but the game was over for us after that.
I mean, the injury to Sims too was tough.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that too.
Do you know how long he's out for? Because the way it looked,
I don't know right now.
Season.
I'm gonna have to ask BJ about that. You know, he much closer to the program than I am, so BJ might know.
So I asked,
but I've been hoping we. Go ahead. What you about to say?
Oh no, I asked Mr. Campbell and he couldn't tell me. Why are y'all not bringing the band? Y'all ain't bringing the band to FAMU?
Man, look, the Dancing Dolls say they didn't want to see Mr. Campbell, so they didn't want to come. That's the issue right there. They didn't want to see Mr. Campbell. So the band said, well, since the Dancing Dolls not going, we not going. And then we better than Marching 100 anyway, so you're like, forget it.
That's fair enough. I just had to ask because I thought it was weird that everyone gives y'all crap for being a band school and y'all don't even bring the band to the game of one of the biggest games of the year.
Yeah. I don't really, I don't know what happened with that, but, it ain't nothing to do with us being broke. It has nothing to do with that. It probably had something else probably came up, but this is the one time they just decided not to bring the band. That's the one time they did. But they normally go down to FAMU. But they add some more seating, maybe our band will come. Because half the student body be taking up all the seating.
That's good. Like that means their students are going to the game. Like when you look at college football, what makes college football so special is the student section. If you don't have a good student section, I guarantee you probably don't have a great environment for home field advantage. You have to have a good student section.
Yeah. Hey, did Texas A&M won?
Texas A&M? Like in the
Commerce.
SEC? Oh, no.
No, Commerce.
Last week? No.
Yeah.
No, they did not. Because what they played Incarnate Word?
Was it close?
Yes, they played them really well. Their secondary is legit. They held Lindsey Scott to his worst game. Lindsey Scott threw 2 interceptions and threw for less than 200 yards, but they did give up a lot on the ground. It was close early. Incarnate Word pulled away late. I think it was like 30-something to I think 7 or 14, but it was close for most of the game until Incarnate Word started running the football. But they shut down Lindsey Scott, man. You got to give them credit for that.
Yeah. Do you feel like this is down here for the Southland other than Southeastern and Incarnate Word?
Yeah, but I think Commerce is probably exceeding expectations. I mean, your first year from D2 and you got a winning record. That's a pretty damn good season. And plus you beat Southeastern Louisiana on the road a week or 2 after they beat Incarnate Word. I got to give Bailiff and that staff a lot of credit. I really do think that Commerce has exceeded expectations, but everyone else is kind of trash this year. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah, because Nichols took a nosedive.
That quarter losing Scott, That's huge.
Yeah,
Look at what Scott's doing this year. I mean, how different would Nichols be if they had Lindsey Scott right now?
for real. But damn, but now I ain't expect them to take. I ain't expecting them to be as good as last year. I ain't think they were gonna take a nosedive though.
Well, they also lost their best wide receiver, who was an NFL draft prospect, and they lost a few pieces on the defense side of the ball. They just had a mass exodus of talent, and I just don't think they were ready to replace all that. So that's what I would chalk it up to. But yeah, the Southland.
Yeah.
I don't think if Southeastern Louisiana doesn't find a way to win the conference, they get into the playoffs. They might just have one bid with Incarnate Word.
Okay. And then I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna hang up and listen. What's the issue with Auburn? How they operating with how they boosters are operating, man? Why did they do all the stuff they did just to get rid of the coach? Why didn't they just go ahead and fire him instead of try to, smear the man?
So the behind the scenes story behind that is, there was an investigation, but you saw today when Prime and everyone got trolled by a parody account about the fake
Mhm.
flight, and no one checked the guy's page apparently, and it was a parody account, and it got everyone in uproar. That's what happened
Mhm.
with the quote unquote scandal at Auburn. It was started by like one of those stupid burner pages, and everyone believed it. They actually investigated him for how he was treating players and his staff behind the scenes. That's what the actual investigation was. But because of the whole social media troll account and people not checking their sources and things like that, it became an affair investigation when
Mhm.
nobody that never happened. And so I just think he was never a fit, man. Really and truly. Plus,
Yeah.
from what I was told from the recruiting coverage at Auburn, is he thought he could use the Boise State model in the SEC, where you can recruit 3 in lower tier 4 stars and compete at a high level in the SEC. And we all know, even people in the chat who don't pay attention to SEC football, know if you aren't recruiting at a top 10 level, you're getting drugged week in and week out in the SEC. That's just a fact. You've got to recruit at a high level, and they never adjusted. Plus, he hired 2 offensive coordinators and 2 defensive coordinators in 2 seasons and whiffed on all 4 hires.
And Mr. Campbell, before I hang up, Mr. Campbell, don't go in hiding when we beat y'all Saturday, all right? And I'm out, Blue.
Appreciate you, Coach Green.
All right.
Oh man, I'm dead. It uh, he did kind of jump around there on everything. But Roby, it is statistically, because when you look at when you look at Central schedule, I tried to explain this. I tried to explain this last week, and you might have missed it because I know it was at the end of the show when we were talking, Roby. But D2 wins do not count in terms of the playoff committee. So right now, so the best record that Central can have right now to end the season in the eyes of the playoff committee is what they got 3 games left. So they would be 7-2 at best in terms of the the playoff committee, Roby. And when you look at the statistics, New Hampshire has the 53rd toughest schedule in the country right now, and they still got to play 2 ranked teams moving forward in Richmond and Rhode Island. They beat Elon 2 weeks ago. Elon is in the top 25 right now, and they got to go on the road against Maine, which we'll see what that looks like. But then you look at North Carolina Central, and I'm trying to find their schedule to get you the exact number. They have the 115th ranked schedule in the country. They do have a win over A&T, who's probably going to win the Big South. Winston-Salem State and Virginia Lynchburg can't count, but they have a 30-point loss to Campbell, who didn't win their conference. They have a 2-point loss on the road to South Carolina State, who just got beat by 30. And when you look at the remaining games, Howard, Norfolk State, and Tennessee Tech, I don't think any of those teams outside of Howard have a winning record this season. So the wins over A&T and New Hampshire, Roby, are going to be great for them. But what I'm basing my projections on in the playoffs is they've penalized teams for not getting in. You can ask Mr. Campbell in the chat and some other FAMU fans. The only reason FAMU got in last year over Mercer is because Mercer played a D2 team and they gave it to FAMU because FAMU had more quote unquote what do they call it, D1 wins on their resume. So that's what I'm basing it on. Like my bracketology, Roby, isn't what I would personally do. Like this is what I think the committee would do. Like I've already said, I think Fordham should get in too, but I'm not putting that on my bracketology when I don't think the committee is going to put Fordham in because I don't think they're going to try to put two Patriot League teams in unless chaos happens on the bubble. That's what I was trying to explain last week. Is this isn't my this isn't my thoughts. This is what I think the committee is going to do. Like this isn't what I would do if I was on the committee. And just like Lawrence said, Mercer only played 9 countable games last season. That's going to be the same predicament that North Carolina Central is in this year. And so that's what that's the problem that Central is going to run into. I do agree, though, Central should get in as if they don't win them. If they win out and don't go to the Celebration Bowl, I do think Central has 2 bigger wins than FAMU has on their resume. They beat New Hampshire and they beat A&T. FAMU, on the other hand, doesn't have any signature wins. I think Central does have a better resume than FAMU, but the playoff committee is going to judge those 2 D2 wins. And so the playoff, because we're just going to get all the information out here now. The playoff committee has a representative from every FCS conference that is in the playoffs. So the MEAC, Ivy League, and SWAC do not have a representative on the committee because those schools don't have auto bids. If you don't have an auto bid, you don't want to go to the playoffs, then you don't get to be on the selection committee because why would your conference care? But there actually was an HBCU rep for the past 5 years on the committee. Hampton's what's it called, AD or whoever. Hampton had a representative on the committee for the past, I think, 2 or 3, however many years the rotation is. So what happens is the committee is never the same every 3 or 4 years. So what happens is they'll all pick a representative from the represented conferences, and they rotate out every 2, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. And last year for the Big South, up until Hampton left the Big South, Hampton's representative was there. So there was HBCU representation on the committee. It's just they happened to rotate off, and it's tough to have a complete HBCU representation on the committee when there's only 3 HBCUs that potentially could be on the committee: Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, and Hampton. Those are the only 3 HBCUs that can have a representative on because they're not in HBCU conferences. So for the past few years, there has been representation, but due to the fact they have to rotate off every few years, this year's there's not. Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like Hampton was on the one for the Big South, but now Hampton jumped to the CAA, so therefore they couldn't have a representative for the Big South, and the CAAs was already chosen. So that's what I was trying to explain. Look at the regional committee. NCCU's AD and Coach Maynard on the regional committee. Yep. Thank you, Lawrence. It'll go down to 2 once A&T moves into CAA football. I'm not looking past Charleston Southern and Gardner Webb, though. North Carolina Central would have defeated 2 conference champions. That should account for something. They destroyed New Hampshire like how Campbell destroyed them. That's why I said I personally think they should be in, just in my opinion. I still feel like people who watch FCS football don't watch enough MEAC and SWAC games to have a better judgment of our teams. I agree with that. But none of the media, they have 0 media on the committee. Which, I mean, I guess that's good or bad. They have a bunch of ADs, which they're supposed to be professional and, not exude any biases, but you never know, man. I don't know what's said in the room. It's the same thing with the college football playoff committee. So we will see. And yeah, I agree. The big thing is if you're Central, you need New Hampshire to win the CAA, and I don't think New Hampshire is going to win the conference, just in my opinion. I think they're going to lose one of the next 2 games, and it's gonna have to go to some weird tiebreaker, and similar to how the Big Sky and OVC are having this problem, you're going to have to go to, some weird tiebreaker because Delaware, New Hampshire, and William and Mary, like, Delaware and William and Mary don't play New Hampshire. So, with William and Mary having that tiebreaker, you know, I think William and Mary is probably going to get the auto bid and probably be a seed. I just see William and Mary winning out. That's just my opinion. I like William and Mary, their makeup, and I think that could be a dark horse in there. And yeah, uh, another factor that goes into picking who makes the playoffs too, just real quick, is they also like to pick teams that have history in the playoffs too. So FAMU will have a slight advantage due to the fact they made the playoffs last year. So that's the one area that FAMU probably has the advantage over Central, is that they would give that some people would give the advantage to FAMU just because they've been in the playoffs more recently than Central has. And I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to do a little bit of research on that. When's the last time, or if Central's been in the playoffs anytime soon? I'll have to definitely look at that. CIA hasn't decided whether they're going to do pod format divisions next season once A&T is Campbell. I'm assuming that's coming in the off season. That decision is usually made not in the middle of November, but we'll see. I would really like to see Princeton. And there's been a lot of good teams over probably the past, let's just take it the past 10 years, that you can argue a lot of people would like to see in the playoffs. I don't is anyone here going to disagree with me that Grambling team with Devontae Kincaid couldn't have competed in the playoffs? Or some of those A&T teams, especially the one with Tariq Cohen, couldn't have competed in the playoffs? Or Jackson State this year competing in the playoffs? I mean, there's always going to be those what ifs, and there's been some big time Ivy League teams that like Harvard's had some teams in the past, Princeton this year, and even just a few years ago, there's a big question mark on how those teams would have competed in the playoffs because they perform really well outside of the conference. So there's been a lot of great teams that haven't had auto bids. Like, this isn't just a SWAC conversation, and I know a lot of people in here are big SWAC fans, and they feel like, outside FCS fans pick on SWAC for not playing the playoffs. Man, Ivy League fans get drugged for that too, because there's a lot of great Ivy League teams that have not got a chance to show it on the biggest stage, and I wish they would, but they don't perform in the playoffs for the same type of reason. Plus, they're more focused on academics in that time of year. So it is what it is, man. I still do wish the Ivy League had some sort of bowl game with another conference that they could play in at the end of the year, but I don't know. I've mentioned that as a potential thing, is that like the loser of the SWAC championship, since they can't go to the playoffs, could go play an Ivy League team in a bowl game. But I don't know if that would ever be something to look at. I agree, man. That Princeton team's legit, man. You're talking about I believe it's a Slovis or Islavis or something like that, man. He's a monster, and absolutely, he's probably going to be an All-American this year. Let's see. There was a lot of good Southern and Grambling teams that would have competed back in the 90s. Definitely, there's been. I'm telling you, man. Every year there's a team that doesn't go in due to their conference not competing in it. That a lot of people wonder, do you feel PV Conley doesn't get the respect he should? Maybe. I mean, what would you define as respect, Coach Graham? I mean, I think you potentially can make an argument he might be a top 5 quarterback in the conference, but outside of that, I don't know. I mean, I think he's solid. He runs the offense that they run really well. Tomorrow night is a big night for PV and Conley and them. If he goes out and has a big game and clinches, because I believe if PV wins tomorrow, Coach Green, correct me if I'm wrong, they pretty much clinched the division, if I'm not mistaken, or will they have to win next week too? I'm pretty sure I guess they can't have the tie with Southern. So yeah, they would have to probably win next week too, I would imagine. Also, like Princeton's jerseys with the Michigan helmets. Man, their colors are clean. I agree with that. Ivy League doesn't give athletic scholarships, but have better facilities. Well, they have huge endowments behind the scenes, if I'm not mistaken. Listen, I'm not a I'm not a money guy or anything like that, so I can't speak to that fully, but I believe they got huge endowments behind the scenes. Ivy League has the funds to compete in any level if they wanted to, which is crazy because every other team in the Ivy League plays in the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, all the other sports do. That's the crazy thing. Howard University has sued the National um, Collegiate Athletic Association, asked the federal judge to stop this weekend's Division One AA playoffs as a team with a 9-1 record was included. Roby, I don't know what your social media is, or if you have a Twitter or Instagram. The article that you pulled that from, can you send it to me on social media? I definitely want to do some research into that happening. I did not know that. So yeah, definitely send it my way. That had to be back in the day if it was the Division One AA. I don't know what year that was. Who ends up winning the CAA? I like William and Mary to win the CAA. William, they're gonna need some help, but I personally I like William and Mary to pull it out. I think New Hampshire is going to drop a game down the stretch. 2 bowl games with significant payouts would pressure the FCS to expand the FCS playoff schools while they are losing money, while the FCS bowl attendees make money. I talked about that today. So I had an interview with HBCU Sports. I think the article's coming out tomorrow with Kendrick Marshall from HBCU Sports. And they interviewed myself, Sam Herder, and I think BJ Jones because they wanted to do a special article on Jackson State on how far they could go in the playoffs if they have if they were ever able to go. And like this year, they were like, say there's a special whatever. They just wanted to know what we thought about Jackson State's chances. They asked us about the Celebration Bowl and our opinions on everything. And I've talked to a few people from some other schools, and the way it was put to me was this is just going way off track. This not has anything to do with the preview or what the show is about, but what it was explained to me as is that North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Delaware, Montana State, schools like that really don't care about the money making process in the playoffs because they got money already. But there are schools like a Weber State, Eastern Washington, some of these smaller schools that wish there was a Celebration Bowl type path for them to make money. And that, like I said in the interview, like I've said on Scotty's show and this show, like Prime mentioning the money situation, worst case, hopefully put some pressure on the NCAA to make some changes, because I do think there's changes. And listen, man, I'm not a businessman, I'm a football guy, but to me, it doesn't make any sense on why you can't make money in the playoffs. And just a few changes here or there can change the whole landscape of what's going on, because the worry for a lot of people, and people downplay this issue, and I don't understand why they downplay it, is eventually, yes, the FCS has always existed losing big teams. You've lost the Georgia Southerns, you've lost the Appalachian States, you've lost the James Madisons, you've lost at one point Idaho, but they ended up coming back. Like, you've lost these big schools that have been successful, and you've always been able to rebound from it. But eventually there's going to be losses and that you're not going to be able to replace. If North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana State, Delaware, Jackson State, FAMU, like if some of these big brands decide to up and leave, which is coming eventually, man, I'm sorry, man, Texas A&M Commerce, Lindenwood, some of these D2 schools, St. Thomas that are jumping up are not going to be able to replace those brands. And yes, you're going to have people step into the top upper echelon of FCS football, but eventually, man, the luster of it's going to run out. And so eventually you're going to have to make some sort of adjustment. And I just don't know if I had to base it on what I know, the NCAA is reactionary and they don't plan ahead very well, especially at the FCS level. So I have very bleak hopes that they're going to make any changes, just in my opinion. I don't believe NCCU's ever been to the playoffs. Dude, it is the Ivy League. These are the richest folks in the world, man. That's all I was trying to say. But I had to, because Mr. Campbell, I'll say stuff about money, and knowing that, it's just my opinion. People be like, man, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, man, I was just giving my opinion. So I had to kind of offer myself an alternate route. But apparently it's one, potentially money, but also it's they want their academic institutions, and they want their students to focus on finishing up finals and things like that. 7166, you're live.
Hey, what's going on, Blue?
What's good, man?
Not much. Hey, I wanted to, just get your take on something. You know what I mean? Because I don't know if they're gonna, see each other in the playoffs per se. But just currently standing with, what you've seen so far this season, who would you like in a matchup between North Dakota State and Weber State?
Where's the game played?
I guess let's just say neutral site.
Neutral site? Man, I think I really do. I know that in this, Dave, I'm sorry in the chat. I know it's going to make you upset. I think Weber State could really compete. I really do. But if let's just say it's a playoff matchup, I would lean North Dakota State in a close one just because Weber has not experienced large amounts of success in the playoffs. And I made the connection on 2 or 3 shows ago where it's similar to how NBA teams like the Jazz, the Hawks, some of these teams are so great in the regular season, but in the playoffs they choke, and you expect the teams with playoff experience to emerge. That's what it's like in the FCS playoffs. Regardless of how good Sac State is, Weber State, South Dakota State, when they get to the playoffs, they get beat by teams who have made runs because it's different. And there's no way to explain it. It's different. So if it's in the playoffs, I would lean North Dakota State. I think the spread on that game would be 7 or less, though. I would expect that to be a 1-score game and super competitive. And I think Weber has the team that you potentially could see that matchup in the semifinals, quarterfinals this year in the playoffs.
Okay. I want to also give my prediction. I know Coach Green called in. He think it's going to be 28-20 for Southern, but I actually think that's going to be the score going FAMU's way. You know what I mean? I just think, at home, when them lights come on, I think they're a different team. Not that, maybe at Southern it's a different game, but, I just think, they have the home advantage. So I like, FAMU in that game. Another thing, too, I will reiterate once again. I called in on your other show. I'll say it again. Sean McCray, turd water. Just not it at quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, not it at all. And another thing I want to say, too, man, like, I don't like how every time they always call some of these coaches offensive geniuses and stuff like that, when it seems to me that they can only run like one particular system, they have to have a certain, quarterback for that system. My personal opinion, I feel like if you're an offensive genius, you can be flexible towards the talent that you have, as opposed to like, oh, I need this particular talent, to run my scheme. You know what I mean? Because like I think on Scotty show they were trying to say that, maybe Sean McCray, is getting subbed out because Dooley likes, mobile quarterbacks. But I mean, he's just mobile at this point because he's not a quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't make it, if you can't conjure up something with your other guys to at least give your team, I think you owe it to your team for them to see other looks and get other types of passes. So if you can't do that, with multiple people, I don't think, you're an offensive genius, in my opinion. That goes for, kind of main the two.
I am inclined to agree with you. I'm not gonna lie. I think people put too much on coaches' schemes being quote unquote unstoppable or explosive or whatever other adjective you want to use to describe it. Great coaches fit their schemes around players that they have. And yeah, sometimes you don't have I think people get confused with the players not being good with the players not fitting the scheme. Sometimes you just don't have the dudes. At the end of the day, if you don't have the guys, it doesn't matter what scheme you have. You're not winning high-level football games. Like you can get by with good coaching to a point, but you're not winning championships and you're not competing at a high level if you don't have the guys to go make the plays. I don't care what play you call. If your guys aren't out there executing, you're not winning anything.
Hey, I definitely co-sign that, man. And last thing, Blue, before I let you get off, man. Hey, when you went up there to check out Elon, man, did you get time to stop by Primetime Cafe?
Man, I didn't get to. I got up to. I stayed outside of Elon because there was a lot of traffic, a lot of wrecks. I got a little bit behind on travel just due to shows I had to do, so I didn't get to Elon until the day of the game, and then I tried to get out of there as soon as possible. But because the game kicked off a little bit late, but I got some plans to get back up to Elon, North Carolina during the playoffs, so I'm going to hit it up when I get back in town, man. But I love the area of North Carolina up there, man. I really do.
Oh yeah, man. No, that 336 area, that's a real good area, man. But hey, when you go though, I'm gonna just tell you right now, when you go, whatever you get food wise is gonna be good, but you want to make sure they got that banana pudding cake up in there. Fire. Trying to tell you. Anyway, man, good show, Blue. Appreciate you. Keep doing your thing.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for calling in.
All
right, and so Isaiah, that's the interview I had with HBCU Sports. So there's probably going to be a full article on that tomorrow on HBCUsports.com. Yes, they could compete in the playoffs. If I said in the interview, I don't know what parts because we talked for 30 minutes on the phone, so I don't know what parts of the interview he's going to use my part for, or Sam Herder, or BJ's. But I said I think Jackson State's at least a quarterfinal team. I really do, because if you look at it, like let's just take the Celebration Bowl out of the equation. If Jackson State if the SWAC had an auto bid, Jackson State right now would probably be a top 8 seed, I would imagine, or close to it. And Jackson State would get a bye week past the first round. I definitely think, depending on who they got in the second round, they definitely probably win in that game. They can get to the quarterfinals. And what I say, when you get to the quarterfinals, anything can happen. And if you're going to make a run into the semifinals or further, that it depends on matchups and also travel. So if JSU would get a bye, compete, but then it would just depend on, because it would be really hard in like the third round to travel to Bozeman, Montana in mid-December and play out there in the cold. It would just be tough. But if Jackson State could get a home field advantage, man, it would be hard for a Montana team to come down to Jackson and win in the vet. So I think quarterfinal team at least, and then from there it just depends on matchups.
Finals or further.
9630, you're live.
Hey, Blue, how are you, man?
What's up?
Got two questions for you. I've been watching a lot of FCS football, and I spent most of my life watching FBS. And because of the prime effect, I kind of got swept into the FCS. And the quarterbacks in the FCS, to me, seems like the same quarterbacks in the FBS, and the only thing different with the FBS is the trenches. What do you think about that?
To a point, yeah. And I said this in the interview today. I'm hoping he puts it in the article. I don't think the talent gap between the FCS and the Group of Five is as big as people think. And maybe the App States, or the upper echelon, the Cincinnati's, UCFs, there might be a bit of a talent gap. But when you look at just the average Group of Five team, I don't think they're any better than what the top 15, top 20 teams in FCS. And I still think if you took the top 10 teams in FCS right now and put them in the Group of Five, there'd be a majority of them that would be competing for a conference championship at the Group of Five level. I don't think the talent gap is huge. Now, when you look at the SC, like if you compare the top 10 of the FBS, the difference is in the trenches for sure. It's depth and extra scholarships, but there's also a level of, let's just be honest, I'm sorry, that no one in the FCS has the level of talent, even at the skill position spot, that a Tennessee and Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State have. They just don't. I'm sorry, I don't care what anyone says. The difference with the upper echelon of FBS is they just got those dudes. They do.
Yeah.
At every position. I'm sorry. Like if you put some of the wide receivers on Ohio State in the FBS and the FCS, man, the stats would be dumb. Absolutely dumb. But when you look at the lower level Power Five in the group of five, I don't think there's a talent difference other than total scholarships. And then when you get up a little bit higher, then the trenches become a major issue. And it's mostly depth with the trenches, and it's really hard to find elite offensive line play.
Yeah, because I look at say for instance for Alabama for years before Nick Saban switched over and started trying to recruit a good quarterback. His quarterbacks, they were not great at all, and he was winning championships. And you take the AJ McCarrons and all those, and I just look at that, and not only that, with the Power Five, just like the SWAC or the MEAC or any other division, you have your top tier teams. But if you look at like the SEC and some of the schools that are in the SEC that are not performing, but they're in the Power Five and they're in the SEC. And not only that, as I've been watching FCS, I just think that the biggest thing is they're deficient in the quality of production. I think that is like the biggest difference from the FBS to the FCS. Because if the production was as good as they show in FBS with the FCS, there's a lot of people that will be watching more FCS games because they just seem more competitive and everybody's hungry. I mean, what do you think about that?
So it's hard to find a quarterback anywhere. Listen, there's a lot of teams at the FBS level that don't have a quarterback. I'm just going to be honest with you. If you take the SEC, for me, where would you put Lindsey Scott, Tim DeMore at Shador Sanders in terms of SEC quarterbacks? I think they can maybe start for at least 4 that I could think of off the top of my head, maybe 5.
Yeah, I
really
agree.
And truly, it's just hard to find good quarterbacks. It is, and that's what separates the elite teams at the FBS level too. And of course, you do have the AJ McCarrons and ones that might not be. You might not put the elite title on them, but I'm sorry, man. I saw AJ McCarron play in high school. He's from my hometown. If you put AJ McCarron in the FCS, like you put him on Incarnate Word or something, he's putting up dumb stats. I'm just saying.
With the offensive line, though, right? I mean, because AJ McCarron, to me, if you put him in the FCS and he doesn't have the offensive line, he looks like, Southern's quarterback, Buchanan, to me, in my opinion. I mean, maybe he has a higher football IQ, but I'm trying to think, if they don't give him time, and he doesn't have the same type skill players that Alabama had, like you said, the top tier players, they had the top, even in the FCS, they have a lot of great skill players and a lot of great skill positions, but the offensive and defensive line is where they drop to the bottom of the tier to me. So I'm not trying to argue it. Watching FCS football now, man, them boys can bang. And I just think it's a lack of production from the TV standpoint of them, viewing it, the way they set it up and use the schools to their equipment and stuff like that. I just think if ESPN, Fox Sports, ABC, or whoever pump money into actually the production and showing those games, they would just, because FCS, man, those boys are hungry. And I'm not going to hold your line. I know you got a lot of people and stuff, but what do you think about that? I just don't think the way they're talking about SWAC and and other Southland, Big South, SoCon, those teams, to me, everybody has their crappy lower tier, that's not performing. FCC has their Vanderbilts, right? So I'm just like, maybe it's not as big of a difference as we see, because we see the kind of crappy TV, like you're viewing it in the 1980s with the rabbit ears or something, and it's just not the quality of viewing. It's just not there. And if they did show it, it will really show some quality games. And I'm gonna leave you at that, Blue, and I'm gonna listen to your answer. Okay.
Hey, appreciate you calling in, man. Great call.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and listen, I've said this. I think in I'm kind of in a unique spot because this channel used to focus a lot on Power Five FBS football, and it kind of shifted to FCS. And I talked to some FBS guys who still support the show, but never watched FCS football in their life. And I got to get some people on the show to talk about it because it's hard to put their word, remember exactly how they explained it. But what they said is the FCS reminds them of early 2000s, late 90s FBS football with just a big playoff. They said that they feel like even though North Dakota State's dominated, for the most part, man, the competitive edge that you see some of the upper tier FBS schools have over other schools, like they don't, because they don't know the whole backstory between money. They were just like, man, it just seems like old school football, and that's what they like to watch. And so I do agree, if the NCAA put some resources in FCS football, it could definitely prosper. And the thing for me is, we have a million bowl games already. Eventually, eventually, in my opinion, eventually people aren't going to just be able to move up, right? Like there's only going to be so many teams you can throw in the CUSA, the Sun Belt, the Mountain West, and make a random bowl game that means nothing before it becomes super watered down, even with an expanded playoff. It's just like, man, eventually you're going to have to put some resources to keep some teams in the FCS and allow both divisions to prosper long term. And I don't see the long-term plan right now from the NCAA to make that happen. But it's something that I'm hoping is addressed eventually moving forward, because of just, in my opinion, logistically. I mean, and you guys can call in real quick. I'm in the show here in another 5-10 minutes. You guys can call in or comment your thoughts. But I mean, eventually, there's not going to be enough bowl games to support all these people, quote unquote, getting extra money by going to bowl. Like, you can create more bowl games, but is everyone going to be cool with is everyone going to be cool with 900, like not but like 100 bowl games that are just that are going to match up like 5 and 7 FBS schools? Eventually, that's what we're going to get to. I mean, that's Jesus Christ, man. Eventually, someone has to put some resources in another level of football so we can have some sort of, I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Eventually, someone's going to have to make some changes. But man, Ricardo, appreciate your donation. It's tough off the top of my head, Ricardo, because I do like to base it all off of stats. But at the end of the season, I'm gonna do a full conference ranking, a full conference rankings based on what happened this year, out of conference wins and everything like that. But probably anywhere between 6 to 8, Ricardo. I think based on on-field results, just off the top of my head, you would have the Big Sky, the CAA, the SoCon, the MVFC. And then you've got a bunch of conferences that you could just kind of throw in there. I think 5 to 7 for the SWAC right now. You could probably make a distinction. That ASUN potentially could be somewhere in there, but I think somewhere in there, man, 5 to 7 will probably be where I put it right now, Ricardo. But I'll do a full actual ranking with like stats and everything at the end of the season once everything wraps up. It's not enough quality teams now. That's what I'm saying. And sometimes, Mr. Campbell, with some teams opting out or being locked into bowl games, like you'll have a 5 and 7. Like there were 5 and 7 teams that have played in bowl games in the past few years. 5-7. Like, you have a losing record going to a bowl game. So for me, if you're the NCAA, you are going to have to eventually keep some teams at the FCS, or you're just going to oversaturate your market at the FBS level. And there's going to be a bunch of teams, and Mr. Campbell and some of the people who kind of know football history can get behind this because they've seen teams do this. You're going to have a bunch of teams who move up, and they're getting money from TV deals. That's great. But the TV deals for the CUSA, Sunbelt, I mean, are not huge. Eventually, if you're not making bowl games, even at 5-7, 6-6, that money it costs to fund all those extra scholarships and everything that you're doing at the FBS level, if the check that you are banking on is not coming in, is going to be extremely difficult to keep afloat at the FBS level. And we've seen a lot of teams try to make the move and fail, or wind up like UMass and UConn hemorrhaging money when they're not allowed, when they don't make it in a conference. So eventually, man, it's the model is going to crash because you're going to oversaturate everything. It's trash. Look at the attendance of those bowl games. The television money is good, but it ain't permanent for these low end deals. I agree. It'd be fun to see some type of catch weight type setup with the FCS and Group of Five. At least have those two levels compete. I like that, Dave.
Hey,
What's up, man?
I
You're live.
Call back in when you were talking about the bowl thing, man, and I'm gonna leave you alone for the night. I promise you. I know you say you're gonna get off in 5 or 10 minutes. So, what I want to ask is, wouldn't they NCAA want to move to that same concept that MEAC SWAC challenge, like the Celebration Bowl, the top person goes in, instead of letting all these teams, like you said, 5-7, 6-6. If you win like your conference, then you go and play another person that won their conference in a bowl. And to me, that would be more exciting than, like you said, 900 or 100 bowl games. What do you think about that? I'm going to listen to your answer, okay, Blue?
I appreciate you, man.
Thank you.
I definitely think that's a better model than what's going to end up happening, because I'm telling you, every year they're going to add bowl games because someone's going to complain that they didn't make it, and we're just going to end up with a bunch of Group of Five matchups and some meaningless bowl games in the middle of December that nobody's going to watch at the end of the day. I definitely think there's got to be some sort of distinction qualifying factor to get people in bowl games. You can't just be like, hey, man, I went just below 500, so I deserve to go to a bowl game. It aggravates me, man, the way it's going. D2 football currently has 3 bowl games. Blue Wise and JSU, Texas Southern not on the game of week survey. I love how y'all sleep on us, Texas Southern. Just don't get on code and we upset. Man, okay, I get it. You want to ride for your team, but hang on, let me pull it up real quick because I forgot which ones I put on there necessarily, man. See, I don't know if the poll's even still there. All right, I don't remember what games I had on the poll because it's not coming up. But man, are you telling me that Texas Southern Jackson State is a better game than a top 20 matchup between Richmond, New Hampshire, a top 5 matchup between Weber State and Sac State, a Southern FAMU game that potentially could decide a playoff fate of FAMU and Southern's fate in the West? And I don't remember the other game I put on there off the top of my head. I think it was South Dakota State UNI, which is the number 1 team in the country, traveling to Northern Iowa. I don't know how you put Jackson State, Texas Southern as the game of the week. Just personally, listen, I've always said it's never zero. Any given Saturday, upsets can happen. But in terms of matchup, if Jackson State runs to football, they shouldn't have any problems with Texas Southern. If they try to get cute, turn the football over, and continue the red zone woes, and it definitely could be close. But I think just if you look at the film, I don't see how you could say Texas Southern has an excellent shot to beat Jackson State this week. Just in my opinion, man. But hey, if you guys pull the upset, giving y'all all y'all's credit. I'll just say that. I'll give you all your credit. Ron, man, we recorded that episode so early in the week, man. I went back, did some research. I'm riding with Sac State, man. I've changed my pick on that game like 3 or 4 times. I got it in the article written that's dropping in the morning. it kills me because I'm on the Weaver State bandwagon in terms of the playoffs, man. But I just think after what Montana State did in terms of running the football with Malott in that running game, Sac State saw an opening, and they're going to do the same thing this weekend against Weaver State. How do you feel about an HBCU conference? JSU, SU, FAMU, North Carolina A&T, Tennessee State, Alabama State is FBS conference. I would love to see it, but at the same time, they don't allow like quote unquote new conferences to form from FCS. So they would have to join the CUSA first or join the Sun Belt, and then because the only conference in FCS that has a opportunity to move up as a whole is the WAC or the WAC, because they used to be a FBS conference. So they have like a grandfather rule where they can be an FBS conference if they want and move up as a conference. You need the conference to generate money for your teams to help everyone be successful. Definitely agree with that. Hold up. Does someone say Texas Southern going to upset Jack State? I can take that bet. Can you explain that NCAA has no control over football at the FBS level? That is true. That is 1,000%. That's true. The NCAA has no control over Power 5 football, really. Bowl games are participation trophies for losers. Oh, I love it, man. Yes, because y'all had Texas Southern pick last, and we who had I didn't release any conference rankings this preseason, man. You might have me mixed up with someone else. I did not release any conference predictions for any conference. That was the poll from the SWAC media day that I released, but I don't vote on that. So that I did not have Texas Southern last. I didn't release any I didn't release any predictions for the conferences this year. He's sleep. Jack State is going to beat Texas Southern. They have no chance. Hey, Bron, I appreciate you following me around, man. I definitely do. But I'm glad you called me on that. I did change my pick since Monday, though. I did. Sad March Madness wants to expand the tournament to 96. I hope they don't, man. It's already big enough. It is plenty big enough as it is now. That's insane that they want to go to 96 now. These schools don't have the money to make it an FBS. The SWAC was D1A in 1977. It might have been. I don't know. Yeah, I'll have to do some research, Lawrence. But maybe I'll have to do some research. But what it was told to me by someone in the NCAA is that the WAC was the only one that had the. It might be okay. So Lawrence, now that I'm thinking about it, it might be because up until what was it 90? It was up until 97. They made they had the split or whatever. Maybe they don't count anything past a certain year. Listen, I'll reach out to some people and find out about that. Lawrence. Scotty had his last, if I'm mistaken. I apologize. I'll have to go back and look, man. Personally, on this channel, I didn't release any conference predictions, but I think we talked about it, and I think the media poll had you guys last. And if I'm not, no, because I didn't have y'all last because I said, if people can quote me, I had UAPB finishing last in the West. I definitely did. I'll have to go find the clip for you, man. But no, I had you guys like 4th or 5th or something like that. But no, UAPB was my pick to finish last from the jump. I did not think they were going to be very good. It's wild to see what schools participate in many conferences through the sport. Always wondered if any models could be made to benefit the FCS like Nova with football. I think it definitely can happen like that. Definitely hit the like button, man. About to wrap this up. If I'm an AD for a team looking to move up, I'm staying far away from the CUSA. I agree. If you're moving up and you don't get an invite to the Sun Belt and you're in the South, do not move up. The CUSA is a death sentence for teams, in my opinion, moving forward. No, they were never 1A. So how long do schools have to play FBS before they could put together a conference? I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I don't. Because I don't know if schools come together and form a I don't think that's ever happened, to be completely honest with you, especially recently. I'm trying to think when's the newest conference that was made at the FBS level. We know the ASUN just came back. I'm trying to think of when's the last like real conference that was created in college football at the P5 or G5 level. Grandma players eating cereal before the FAMU game. It was when they created the playoffs in 1978, which was the first. Yes, okay, you're right. You're right, Mr. Campbell. It was Division 1AA, then it became FCS when they changed Division 1A to FBS. There you go. The Conference USA is new. It's newer, yeah. The Big East ended though, sadly. I wish they would bring the Big East back. Which conference do you see coming to an end? I mean, I don't think it will ever I don't think either will ever end necessarily. I just think the FCS, depending on which teams end up leaving moving forward, could kind of fall in terms of relevancy. CJ, I don't think either one is ever going to come to an end. Yeah, the Big East was the last conference to rise from nothing. I think the AAC I thought the AAC kind of rebranded itself for something else. Let's see. AAC. Trying to see if it gives me no, because the AAC was founded in 1979 and then it came back in 2013. So it was there in 79, then I believe it disbanded and came back in 79. So a lot of like the newer conferences were conferences that were disbanded and brought back, if I'm not mistaken. This NCAA needs to be broken up. No argument for me there, man. I have said that on the show since we started it. In fact, I missed the Big East too. Too many Catholic schools didn't care about football. I went to a Big East school. Man, the Big East in basketball, and even like the old football Big East, man, when West Virginia was rolling, Louisville was at the time. The Big East was underrated in football. Just gonna say that. And it's a racket. The AAC is the old Big East. That's what I thought. Yeah, it's supposed to be the old Big East or like a version of it. But guys, appreciate y'all tuning in, man. 2 hours for the Week 10 FCS preview. You can catch me on Kobe's channel, the Blitz City Podcast, tomorrow night, talking a lot of football before the weekend. But guys, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button on y'all's way out, man. If anyone's traveling to games this weekend, y'all be safe. I'm going to be up in Nashville for Tennessee State CMO, so stay tuned for highlights and pictures coming from that game this weekend. I'll be back Sunday night for the Week 10 FCS recap, probably about 8 p.m. Central Time, depending on my travel. But guys, be safe out there. But until next time, the Blue Bloods are out.